Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking about Scientology again. So trigger warning, if talking about religion or religious facilities upset you, this is probably not going to be the video for you. So I suggest that you go ahead and skip this and maybe tune into some of the other normal content on my channel. But again, as I always state, I feel this is a topic that needs to be discussed, and I will continue to discuss it until something is done to correct the issues that we see with this organization. So, getting right into this video, and as I have promised you guys, I am doing extra research. I actually have notes from another source besides Leah Remini's special, and I am continuing to do research, and I will put that all in a future video for you guys. But right now, I want to talk about Leah Remini's episode. This is going to be season 3, episode number 7. I'm going to go ahead and apologize for my looks today. It is about 4:30 in the morning Central Standard Time. I have just finished watching this episode and decided I needed to get this video up while I still had a lot of this information in my head, but I also have my notes. So in season 3, episode 7, they are speaking about ideal orgs. Now, at the beginning of the episode, they talk about the previous 2 episodes, and to refresh your memory, one of them was handling the situation with Shelley Miscavige's disappearance, and then after that, let me just double check, I think we talked about the Nation of Islam, yes, the Nation of Islam and Scientology. So those 2 episodes, the show received letters from Scientology attorneys objecting to the content. In the first letter, they accused Remini, quote, of spreading vitriolic religious hate and bigotry that instigates violence. Sorry, my tongue doesn't want to work this morning, but it's going to be okay. In the second letter, they stated that Remini is back like Jason from Friday the 13th. Now, I cannot take this religion seriously at all, but then when you have your attorneys writing stupid shit like this in a letter to a show, I really have to question your ability to do anything. But that aside, we're going to get into talking about this. We're going to start off with what is orgs. Now, orgs is short for organizations, and it's a term used by Scientology churches around the world. So it's their little mini pop-up churches that they have everywhere is what they call an org. And you have 2 types of orgs. You have the original org, and then you have what they call ideal orgs. Original orgs are like the beginnings, like L. Ron Hubbard days, and shortly after. Ideal orgs didn't come about until the early 2000s, and they serve a couple of purposes. Sorry guys, I'm just a little distracted. I've got wet hair and shedding, and so okay, I'm going to get back on the point. Ideal orgs were a way of proving expansion for Scientologists and a way to collect money from Scientologists and advise them that they needed to fund the expansion of Scientology. Now, Scientologists have to pay for their religious training up this bridge to what they call clear, which is like you're totally aware, you're totally in the midst of the best life you can lead. You have to pay for every step up that bridge to clear, and not a little form of money. Like this is a lot of money that you're paying along the way. Now on top of that, they are bugging you to fund more churches. By expanding to new buildings, the church avoids issues with the IRS over excessive amounts of cash. So they're getting all this money from you so that you can get your religious training from them, which means they have a lot of cash because you're paying them to be a part of the church. So their way out of it is they buy all these buildings showing that they're expanding so that their actual cash flow is within rights of the tax exempt status. But in all reality, they have buku's cash. And we're going to get into that because we're going to detail some like major cash funds that have been going on. So we're going to go to March 19th, 2017, which is the grand opening of the North Hollywood, California facility. This was promoted as an ongoing global expansion through the Ideal Org program. So they've opened another org, and this is another example of how much they're expanding, and there's so many Scientologists, and there's such a need for this. So they're going to talk in this part. The crew was actually on scene. So this is March 19, 2017. Leah Remini's crew. Now, Leah Remini wasn't there, but like the filming crew and some of the people that ask questions are on scene at this. And they speak to this man named Ed Parkin, who's a Scientology spokesperson. He stated that the North Hollywood, California facility was a beautiful 100,000 square foot facility entirely paid for by parishioners. Entirely paid for by parishioners. So on top of them paying to be a part of this church and to do their religious duties, they also paid for this 100,000 square foot building. He also advised that the success of Scientology is an expansion and parishioners are intensely happy with the religion. Really? Because there are dozens upon dozens upon dozens of people that are out of the religion now talking about how unhappy they are with what they went through. During this time period, Scientologists called the police on the crew to have them leave from around the grand opening site. Now, they were not in the grand opening festivities, they were outside of it on a public sidewalk, and the police still made the crew leave the area. So they are walking away. They are followed by another Scientologist and by Parkin himself. They watched the crew even after they left the area. They were also taking pictures of the vehicle that they were in. And after they left the area, they were nowhere near the grand opening. A Scientologist PI was on their tail, taking pictures of their vehicle, their license plate number, and filming them. When they confronted that PI, he sped off at a high rate of speed and left the area. So one, you're illegally following somebody, you're taking down their information, you're filming them without their permission, and you're taking pictures of their license plate. But then you also break other laws by driving off at an excessive rate of speed, by not stopping at a stop sign right there, not using your turn signal. So you've just broken a whole bunch of traffic laws on top of all these other laws that you're breaking. It's just constant with these people. It's constant. So here is a quote. An ideal org is configured to provide services of the Scientology religion to its parishioners while also serving the community with social betterment and outreach programs. Now this was per www.scientology.org. David Miscavige creates a myth among Scientologists that there is such a demand for Scientology. Scientology has become so popular that they have to build these buildings, and they're giving this illusion to the parishioners that there's a need for this, and we need to do this to clear the planet, because that's our main goal, is we're going to clear the planet. And this is his way of weeding more money out of his parishioners. Most of these parishioners are already going broke just trying to get up the damn bridge to clear. But you're going to weed more money out of them so that you can build more buildings. So that you can protect your ass from the IRS. Good on you, David Miscavige. You're wonderful. They make huge productions of the openings. There are like these massive ribbons on the front of the buildings. They showed a lot of pictures. where they have these huge ribbons across the buildings, and they have the parking lot jam packed with people, and so there's all these great pictures of all these people for the grand opening. But what they fail to tell people is they fly people in from other organizations to be at the grand opening so that they have that jam packed view for the production. Right after they do all the pictures and the filming and all that stuff, these people leave and go back to their homes. And then this big, beautiful, hundreds of thousands of square foot building that costs them millions of dollars of money is just sitting there empty most of the time. So we're going to go back in time. So we went from 2017, we're going to go down to 2001. We're going to visit Buffalo, New York. A Scientology org in Buffalo, New York came up against the state government in an eminent domain situation. The state decided to exercise their eminent domain and take possession of this property. So Scientology sued the city of Buffalo and the state of New York and won a significant settlement. They used that to buy a larger, more elaborate building for the org. And this became the beginnings of the ideal org situation. David Miscavige saw this as a way of funneling his money. This is like a big money laundering scheme. It's like, we're getting all this money in. The IRS is going to start looking at us funny if we don't do something with this. So we're going to start building these huge buildings portraying this great demand. So Scientologists relocating their smaller orgs into these larger, more elaborately designed buildings, and this became known as the Buffalo pattern, which is the beginnings of the ideal org. So now we're going to talk to a man by the name of Bert, and excuse me if I don't know how to say his last name because they didn't say it on the show, but Shipers, I want to say is what his name is. If it's totally butchered, I'm sorry. But Bert was a former Scientologist who was also a major contributor to the Seattle Ideal Org. He was in Scientology for 23 years and was one of the top 5 donors. And when he left, he was OT4. So let's talk about what OT is. OT is an operating thetan level. And it's the spiritual states above clear on the bridge, which Scientology defines as knowing and willing cause over life, thought, energy, space, and time. So you get up this bridge and then you get to these OTs. And then you have to get through these OTs and then you get to clear. Bert estimates that he spent $750,000 going up the bridge and advised that he was borrowing money on top of that to give to Scientology. So he spent $750,000 of his own money to make his way up this bridge in his religion to achieve his ideal state. Really? I remember when I was younger and I went to church. I was raised Southern Baptist. I'm no longer Southern Baptist, but I was raised Southern Baptist. And they would pass around the collection plate. And you usually had a collection, and then you had the building fund for a building that was never built or anything of the such. Every church had a freaking building fund. I never understood that, but yes, there was a building fund that you also gave to. But that was optional for you to give to. But they passed around the collection plate every Sunday. I didn't spend no $750,000. It was like, what change did I have in my pocket? Maybe I had $1. I didn't spend $750,000 in a religion. But I digress. Bert has a stack of accommodations from Scientology. that cost him money on top of this $750,000. This is accommodations for him giving money to the church for buildings or this or that or the other. They pull out one accommodation. They're like, how much does this cost you? He states $250,000. So, anybody doing the math right now, the man's at $1 million. Boom. Already. They pull out another one. He says that's $75,000. They pull out one called the Silver Humanitarian for the Drive for Seattle's building. Cost him $250,000. That's what he states at first. But then as he starts talking, the money racks up. So Seattle decided to have an ideal org. They found a building. The original building cost was $1.2 million. Bert and his wife Lynn donate $10,000, $5,000 apiece. Well, then the upper management decided that that building was not good enough. He said it was too small, and so that they had to find another building. So, after about a year or so, they find a 30,000 square foot building for $3.7 million. $3.7 million for this building. In the first year of this fundraising for this $3.7 million building, Bert and Lynn gave $300,250. And this was because they started doing weekly fundraisers to fund this ideal org. So the building cost $3.7 million. Then they stated, oh, well, we've got the building now. It's going to take us $3.5 million to renovate it. So damn near the cost of the building to renovate it for their needs in the church. Bert advised that he was pressured to get... let me get my thoughts together because these numbers are staggering. He advised that he was pressured to give great sums of money. And he said the fundraising is so pressuring that you just give money so that it'll stop. And this is the kind of stuff he's talking about. He had a Sea Org member come to him and his wife and demand $70,000. One lump sum. Write me a check right now. $70,000 for this building. He told them he couldn't do it. It was putting him too far in debt. He couldn't do it. Now he's already given, let me remind you, he's already given $300,250. And then this Sea Org member comes in, sits down, well, I need $70,000. I need you to cut me a check. Really? But because he did not give this $70,000, this Sea Org member wrote a knowledge report. Now, a knowledge report in Scientology is kind of like a write-up at a job, or, you know, like when you're in school, you get sent to the principal's office. This is the kind of bullshit that is going on. This Sea Org member wrote a knowledge report, and I'm going to quote part of this knowledge report. My reason for writing this report is that on my last visit with Bert and Lynn, they told me that they were not going to donate anything else to the building cycle as it would put them further into debt. The fact that it would only take them a year and a half to handle their debts if they donated this amount to the building tells me that they can is underlined, do more if they were willing to, as a year and a half is not a long time to handle a substantial debt. Let that sink in for a minute. This person came to them and demanded $70,000. They said, we can't do it, it's going to put us too far in debt. This person then writes, well, it'd only take them a year and a half to pay this off. I mean, there's no big deal. It's a year and a half. they're not willing to do so. They're not willing to pay an extra debt for an additional year and a half of their life to fund a non-essential building for a church that is insane. Well, I be. Bert was told being a founding contributor to this building, he would have his name on a plaque in the building. He advised that he was actually the 5th person to donate. And the donations for your name to be on the plaque started at $5,000 a piece. He was the 5th person to donate. He donated $5,000 for himself and $5,000 for his wife. So that should have ensured that his name was on this plaque, right? Well, his name is not on that plaque. Now let's get into why. This is kind of going to go all over the place because you've got to kind of get a context. He wasn't put on this plaque because his close friends ended up resigning from the church. When they attempted to just resign and leave quietly, the church decided to make them enemies of the church, which meant Bert and his wife, being active members of the church, were supposed to disconnect from them. And he didn't want to do that. Now, that's the reason why his name's not on the plaque. So now let's jump back to 2008. That is when he achieved OT4. And out of his own mouth, he said that was the most degrading experience of his life. Now you would think he's getting closer to clear. He should be good. But after he left his auditing session, in which he achieved OT4, he found it to be the most degrading thing in his life ever. He'd ever experienced. That was it. Nothing else topped this experience. He decided to himself, he never said it out loud, that he would not be going back for auditing again. And he didn't say it out loud, not even to his own wife, because that is tantamount to getting kicked out of the church and being declared an enemy and people having to disconnect from you. He advised that he continued to be a good Scientologist and continued to give them money for this ideal org. And he said he did so because he didn't want to disconnect from his family. He also didn't want to lose customers at his business or employees at his business because they were also Scientologists. Jump 1 year ahead. We're in 2009. The St. Petersburg Times published several articles which they entitled The Truth Rundown. Now, this is when a lot of the big higher-ups in Scientology had left, and then they had started telling their stories. And this was his first major exposure to the abuses of both physical and mental that were going on at Gold Base for these higher-ups in Scientology. He said Bert and his friends had read the articles. They began talking about it. Now, these are his friends that had left the church. They began talking about it. This was the time when Bert finally decided he was comfortable enough to tell his wife that he was no longer going back to the church for services. This man sat on this for like a year before he felt comfortable to talk to his own wife because of how this church operates. Again, what the hell is going on? Bert did not believe the articles at first until his wife decided to look into what the church's response was. So, in 2009, a spokesperson for the church, his name was Tommy Davis, responded to the Truth Rundown. His response was a yelling tirade in which he blamed one of the victims and stated that one of the victims was the one that was perpetrating the abuse and not David Miscavige. And how dare he put his crimes off on David Miscavige. And it was just an incoherent yelling rant. That's when Bert and Lynn started, piecing things together. And they realized, oh, we've been screwed. Royally. They still maintained, they still continued to go to events because they feared being declared. Now, the Church of Scientology states that there is no disconnection policy and that, they completely respect other people's religious rights and all this stuff. But as we've seen through this show many, many times again, that is all BS. So he continued to go to these events and pretend to be a good Scientologist because he did not want to have to disconnect from anybody. Now, Bert's stepson and his wife were Sea Org members. Well, when they left, Bert paid their freeloader debt. And as we've learned in previous episodes, freeloader debt is their debt for getting services for Scientology while they're in the Sea Org. You have to pay that off to remain in good standing. Bert paid that debt for them so that they could remain in good standing and the family wouldn't be broke apart. Now, for the daughter-in-law, they paid $104,000. For his stepson, he paid $53,000. So it's $157,000 in freeloader debt that he's paid, on top of his $750,000 to get up the bridge. This $300,250 he's paid for this building, plus other monies that he has given over time for this church. This man is well over $1 million in debt because of this church. Yeah, that's normal. Bert and Lynn decided to finally tell their son and daughter-in-law, who worked for them, what they had found out. Their stepson immediately reported them. So members of the church were trying to make contact with Bert and Lynn to handle them. They refused these contacts. After that, they only heard from the church about, oh, well, the building's fixing to open, the grand opening's coming. During this time, that's when their friends left the church. And members wanted Bert and Lynn to confirm that they had cut their ties with their friends. Usually that is something that they do in an interview, and then they also demand it in writing that you've done that, so it's like a contract that you're bound to. They refused to do that. So, fast forward, July 24th, 2010 is the grand opening of the Seattle org. Bert and Lynn go. At the grand opening, security would not allow Bert into the building that he just paid $300,000 for it to be purchased and renovated and all this. But he wasn't declared at this point. He was still a member in good standing. He just had some marks against him, but he couldn't enter the building that he just donated all this money for. Yeah, that makes total sense. So, Bert was not declared, Bert and Lynn were not declared subversive. My brain is just not working, people, I'm sorry. Until June of 2011. So, almost an entire year later, that's when they were finally declared. He didn't even realize he was declared until somebody else in the church got a copy of his declaration and sent it to him. He lost clients, he lost employees, and he lost his stepson and his daughter-in-law. Bert and Lynn did not talk to their son for 6 years until he finally decided he had enough and left the church. Now, I just rattled off a whole bunch of numbers for you, but this man has given well over $1 million to this church. And he did everything he was supposed to do. And for what? Nothing. Nothing. He has a stack of papers saying, you're a good Scientologist. Until he started questioning things. And then he's out. So then, the ending of the episode, they talked to Paul Burkhart. Paul Burkhart was a former Sea Org member, and he was also the Ideal Org architect. He was in the Sea Org from 1985 until 2013. Now, during this time is when David Miscavige started the International Landlord Office. And that office is in charge of developing the new ideal orgs. So they make the plans, they develop the layout, they even design the uniforms for the people that are going to be working there. It's all the stuff that has to do with the new ideal orgs goes through this International Landlord Office. But all the plans have to be approved by David Miscavige himself. So they draw up the plans, they send them up to David, he pours over them, he puts his little seal of approval on there, then the fundraising begins. So just in planning a ideal org, it's going to cost them anywhere between $100,000 and $300,000 depending on the size, the place, whatever. Some of the orgs to be opened, just for them to be open, cost anywhere between $8 million and $30 million. And this includes all the details down to the uniforms, the centerpieces, what the hell ever. Whatever little minute detail they have to put in there, that's included in this price. And Burkhart even stated that just the building, just the shell in the Rome Ideal Org cost them $25 million. Anybody else see where this is just completely wasteful? Well, I'm going to prove that point here in a minute. So, they were talking about how does the funding get done for these Ideal Orgs. Well, like Seattle was completely funded by the local Scientology group. Only funded by them. So they're paying their way up this bridge to clear. And then they raised all this money for this Ideal Org. Now, the Church of Scientology has churches all over the world. Why is this Ideal Org solely placed on the local people? Why isn't it coming from the pool of the church? So, they have a fundraising office that's included in the International Landlord Office. And Burkhart stated that the fundraising office has poured over every book ever written on fundraising to come up with the way to make more money. And they decided that their best technique for raising money in Scientology was themed events. So they would do like a Pirates Night or Star Wars Night or whatever. And that's how they would get people to open up their pockets and give them more money. They even had kids raising money for these orgs. Now, this came from a fundraising directive from Seattle, and it's a quote. Occasionally, children in the audience will want to participate and will donate their piggy banks or allowance. People love this, so back it wholeheartedly. So yes, use their kids against them so that they give you even more money. They also use what they call shills. Shills is the technical term for someone who has agreed to donate in advance but appears to be doing so spontaneously. So usually they find somebody with a deep pocket, talk them into donating to this Ideal Org, and then have them spontaneously stand up and declare some large amount of money during this fundraising event. And that prompts other people to donate. So here's a quote from a letter to Scientologists. To every Scientologist, the war to establish Ideal Orgs is very... If you are relying on someone else to get the job done, shame on you. Really? Now it's a war. What is this? The war on drugs? The war on terror? What is this? The war on getting a new building? What the hell are you talking about? And why are these people still listening to this? So Burkhart stated that he's been to 15 to 20 of the Ideal Orgs. And he said most of the time they're completely empty. If they're not completely empty, they're usually only occupied by one or two people. So they have these massive buildings that cost millions of dollars, and they're sitting empty. Mike Renner said that he lives right down the street from the Inglewood Ideal Org. He said he's never seen one person walking in, walking out, standing out front, nothing. He said he drives by the building all the time. Why? Why? So they use promotional videos to sell all of this to Scientologists. So the promotional videos sell the expansion of the religion through these Ideal Org openings. And it's just another way to dupe these people out of even more money for nothing. And it's sad. And this is all done in the name of religion. So Burkhart advised that the Ideal Order program, coupled with his not allowed internet access from his cell phone, is what prompted his exit. He stated that he had a cell phone that had internet access that's technically not allowed. And he started reading things. And the more he read, the more he was just like, this is not good. So Burkhart ended up leaving. Now, I don't know what time he ended up leaving. I know that he states that his end date was in 2013. So he left before the opening in Hollywood or whatever. But this is what you have here, people. You have a person saying they're well over $1 million in debt to this church. Just based off of paying for their own religion, paying for their wife's religion, buying their kid out of freeloader debt, along with his wife, so that they could remain in good standing and they could keep their family together. And then on top of this church pressures him into spending over $300,000 for a building that doesn't get used. You have this going on not only all across the United States, but also all across the world. And I have stated several times in past videos, why isn't the FBI doing anything? Why isn't the IRS doing anything? Why isn't the United States government doing anything? Well, I'm going to tell you something. In a future video, once I get some more of this evidence together, I'm going to let you know that the FBI does have a file on Scientology. They have quite an extensive file on Scientology, and I will let you know some of the stuff that was let out in that file. But on top of that, I'm also going to try to see if I can't get a copy of that file. I'm going to be using the Freedom of Information Act to write a letter to the FBI to see if I can't get my hands on at least some of the Scientology stuff. Because at this point, and from what I've read that they have in their file, this shit should have been shut down years ago. Years ago. And why it's still up is what I want to know. Anyway, guys, I know this was a long one. I had like 15 and a half pages of notes on this episode. Y'all definitely would not want to watch this series with me because I'm pausing every 5 seconds and like jotting down notes. But I want to be accurate in my rants. And right now, this is the most accurate I can be. This religion needs to be shut down. It is abusing people. It's breaking apart families. It is stealing people's money. It's putting them into debt. It's leaving children without education. It's leaving adults without education or work experience. And then when they finally decide to leave this church, they have to start all over again. And that is bull. So that is going to end it for today. I know this was a long one, and I'm sorry, guys. I know I kind of got a little ranty and a little mad. But this is ridiculous to me. And if it's not ridiculous to you, I don't know what to tell you. But if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I do this series. I also do regular videos on makeup and daily events or whatever. Ring the bell. I usually post Monday through Thursday before 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm thinking about expanding that to Monday through Friday. Also, I'm going to have all my social media linked down in the description box. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Come find me, drop a line, let me know what you think. And if you have any information on Scientology that you want included in a future video, go ahead and send it to me. With any research you got, it's just going to help me out a little bit more. I'm going to continue to speak out on this. I advise others to speak out on this. And until next time, I'll see you guys.